Okay, my favorite fantasy series of all time is Malazan Book of the Fallen.
Okay.
I've read that series just once in my life, but its influence is still on me so much that one of the short stories from Abandoned by the Gods, I didn't even realize that I'd taken inspiration from Malazan until the point that I was making content to market the book, where I realized that one
Mhm.
of the characters inspired is very directly inspired by another character from Malazan, like Felisin Paran. Her entire arc of being a being a noble who ends up being a slave, and then she learns the power dynamics and learns how to overcome all the abuse and the oppression. It's very similar for my character Jagdasi from Servant of God. That's the title of the short story. Except the treatment is very different, of course, because Malazan has this one character for two full books, but I have it for, I think, 20 pages or something, 20 or 30 pages. So
Mhm.
it's a very short, I mean, it's a short story. The treatment is very different because, again, the world is different. The society that I'm exploring in this world is different from what Malazan is. But at its core, it's very similar.
Mhm.
And as I'm working on my current books right now, I see how Malazan's, not the magic systems exactly, but the way Malazan uses the learning curve of what the world is. Because if you've read Gardens of the Moon, he just dumps you in the middle of a battle and
Mhm.
you don't know what's happening. You kind of figure out what's happening by the end of the book, and then book two happens in a completely different continent with a whole new set of like 100 or 200 new characters.
Mhm.
And again, like trying, just as you're figuring out okay what's happening, you are again through, like, the rug is pulled from under you, and that keeps happening for 4 or 5 books. But
Mhm.
by the end of each book, as you finally figured out this world, this you finally learn something, and then he dumps you in this finale where all these many confusing plot points just come together and they give you this very satisfying resolution where
Mhm.
everything just starts to make sense. And that's one book, that's each book. But then when you take these 10 books and you combine them with the finale, that's what it is. Like 10, you might think it's 10 random confusing things, but when they come together, it's just this very beautiful cathartic feeling in the end of like 10,000 pages of catharsis.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to build with my next, and that's what I hope to build one day. And I'm trying to figure out, like, I did it on a very small scale with Help My Dog because I did have 3 or 4 plot points which converged in the end, and it had that finale where everything comes together.
Thing about Malzahn is I haven't read it yet. I probably know the least about it.
Okay.
I heard about that pretty late, but it is on my list. I definitely am very interested because I've heard the same thing that
Yeah.
the world building can be really, really cool.
Yeah. So it's also very absurd. Okay. Like, there's a race of these dinosaurs with swords for hands, the Kishen Shamal. There's the children of the light, the children of the shadow, the children of the dark. They
Mhm.
have these undead Planimas, and it's beautiful to see how this 100,000 year old history all comes together with all these many races and how they interact with each other.
Mhm.
And I mean, just take the Kishin Shamal for example. Like, dinosaurs with swords for hands, that's a ridiculous visual. But the way he
Yeah.
uses it, and they have their own culture, they have their own social hierarchy. So that's another thing that I tried to implement in Help My Dog, where I was like, okay, it is a guy and his dog, but what more crazy things can I do with it? Let's have an eldritch god in this. Let's have an owl who is a mage. Let's have a secret service. And I brought all these things together and I somehow made it work. It's one of the things that I got good feedback for from my beta readers.
Mhm.
And again, like, I was only able to do it, like, blend all these absurd elements together because I saw Malazan do it in a serious way, and I
Mhm.
saw One Piece do it in a funny way. One
Yeah.
Piece is again another huge influence for me, which I think Daniel Green has said this in his videos as well. Malazan fans need to read One Piece, and One Piece fans need to read Malazan because
Yeah.
they are very similar in the scope. They're very similar in their absurdity. It's just the treatment that's different. Where Malazan is very serious and very grim, it also has
Mhm.
these moments of like hilarious humor.
Yeah.
One Piece is largely goofy and cartoony, but then it deals with some very hard-hitting themes at times. Like, it deals with slavery, it deals with just okay, slavery is the first thing that comes to mind because of a particular storyline in there. But
Mhm.
yeah, like, it deals with the government controlling history, erasing history,
Yeah.
controlling truth and the media.
Yeah.
So you don't expect that from something which has people where the protagonist is a rubber man, but he does it so fantastic. So that's those are two influences that I did take for my book. Help My Dog Is the Chosen One,
Hmm.
and of course Sanderson is an obvious example of influence because, like I said, I've seen his lectures a few times already, and I've learned
Hmm.
a lot from him, not just by reading his book but also by listening to the man. And
Yeah.
if you ever listen to Sanderson speak, he
Hmm.
really loves writing and he loves teaching, and it's not just in his books that he's teaching about his world. Even in his lectures, he really makes sure that you understand what the writing process is like, what the world building process is like. If he's
Hmm.
talking about character, he will go in depth and he will give you good examples that you can actually use for your own writing.
Yeah.
So I think those are the three top influences for me.